to The Social Show live with Viwe Tyolwana, only on brandlive.co.za.
A very warm welcome and good morning to The Social Show, where it's your one-stop shop for all things CSI, CSR, as well as CSV. And if you're still pondering on what those acronyms stand for, you're definitely listening to the right show. It means I will inform you and help you get involved. Of course, if you have any projects, any initiatives, anything that you want to ask, you want to know a little bit more about, please don't be afraid to let me know on @BrandLiveRadio on Twitter, or send me a message on my email, press@social-tv.co.za, or you can just call us, on 011-083-8606. Before we get into the day and the topic at hand, we're going to get straight into the news. Save water or queue for water. That was the blunt message to Capetonians at a City Council Day Zero briefing on Sunday, the 28th of January. City officials said 200 points of distribution or pods would be activated when the dam levels, currently at 27.2%, reached 13.5%. Each individual would get an allowance of 25 litres a day. Director of Safety and Security Richard Bozeman said the water supply to residential areas would be reduced or cut off in an attempt to stretch the remaining water for as long as possible and to minimise the impact of human life and jobs. The pods would be equipped with toilets and refuse management facilities because the queues would be expected to be long. And bulk water supply would be made available for organizations delivering to the vulnerable. 20 safety officials will be present at low-risk collection sites and up to 70 at those classified as high risk. In other news, draft regulatory measures relating to proposed domestic trade in rhino horn have been finalized. Environmental Affairs Minister Edna Molewa announced last Thursday. The Department of Environmental Affairs published for public comment a set of draft regulations relating to proposed domestic trade in 2017. The domestic scale of rhino horn became illegal in 2017 following a constitutional court order that upheld a 2015 High Court decision which lifted the 2009 moratorium. The domestic sale of rhino horn is conducted subject to issuing of relevant permits in terms of the National Environment Management Biodiversity Act, which is NEMBA, and its regulations and is applicable to provincial legislation. Section 57 of the NEMBA, which provides that a person may not carry out a restricted activity involving a specimen of a listed threatened or protected species without a permit. And lastly, in our news, many of the world's largest retailers and food companies have agreed to a better labeling of products by 2020 in a bid to radically cut food waste. Large global companies, including Walmart stores, Tesco, Kellogg's, Nestle, Careflower, as well as Unilever, supported a call to action sponsored by the Consumer Goods Forum and unveiled on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly this past Wednesday. The initiative is designed to eliminate multiple labels on food, such as manufacturing and displaying dates that can baffle shoppers and lead to unnecessary food waste. An estimated 1.3 billion tons of food worldwide is thrown out, with the average American household throwing about $1,500 of food per year. And that concludes our news for today.
The jobs and economy of the future will be urban. By 2030, 60% of the global population will live in cities. To ensure decent work and economic growth, local leaders face many challenges. 40 million jobs need to be created every year for young people entering the labour market. Depending on the developing region, between 45 and 90% of workers are in the informal economy. There are 168 million children in child labour worldwide. Women's average wages are between 4 to 36% less than men's. Many local governments are already taking action, fostering community participation and social dialogue between employers and workers, including in the informal economy, adapting and responding to economic trends and challenges, promoting entrepreneurship, job-oriented policies, innovation and labour protection, and learning from one another through city-to-city cooperation. Local and regional governments do all this to ensure inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all, which is Goal 8 of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, Achieving SDG 8 depends on local governments. The world is becoming increasingly urban. We'll need to build a new city for 1 million people every week to keep up, or manage the growth of the cities we already have. The battle for sustainable development will be won or lost in our cities, working with the rural areas on which they depend for food and natural resources. Mayors and local governments are already taking action to win this battle. We provide basic services and work with slum dwellers and neighbourhoods to upgrade their living conditions. We improve air quality by investing in public transport and green mobility. We protect the environment through sustainable waste management. We tackle urban segregation by ensuring quality green and public spaces for all. We protect urban cultural heritage for future generations. We monitor and regulate land use to make cities more resilient to climate change and disasters. We involve our communities in planning for inclusive and sustainable urbanisation. Local and regional governments seek strong partnerships with national governments to ensure enabling legal frameworks and adequate resources, and play our full role in achieving Sustainable Development Goal 11, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities. The Sustainable Development Agenda depends on local governments.
You're listening to brandlive.co.za.
Here we're back on the social show, and of course, if you missed the first part of the show, fret not, there will be a podcast straight after this broadcast. It's a lovely, lovely Wednesday morning, and on the show, I'm speaking to somebody who I love having on my show. We have the spokesperson of the BDS movement, Kwara, Kekana. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Rio. We love absolutely your show, and we enjoying being here. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for coming. Last time we had a chat, there was a hunger strike going on. Political prisoners in Palestine were going through a hunger strike, and I think our country also, in its own way, participated in the strike. Can we sort of speak on how that sort of concluded, if at all, and maybe the developments from then before we get into what it is we're talking about today?
Sure. You know what? I think firstly, we need to come onto your show more often. We need 100%. To keep up with what's happening, because it's been a while. It has been a while. It's been a while since the hunger strike. And, I can't even recall the date, but I do know, in terms of the South African response to that particular campaign, it was during a time when the Palestinian political prisoners went on a hunger strike. And I think it went up until day 55.
Yes.
And when you look at the, the kind of psychological, physical effects the hunger strike has up until, those kind of dates, the 55th day, sleep deprivation, but also hallucinations as well, and many other psychological and physical kind of trauma that takes place, and the body just becomes another being, It was really bad. It was really bad. But the kind of solidarity and the kind of conversation that came out of that particular hunger strike globally, and it really highlighted we talk about the Palestinian struggle broadly, but to be honest with you, View and me, the different aspects to the struggle and the political prisoner situation is also one significant, issue that we need to highlight often when we talk about the Palestinian political prisoner, the Palestinian issue, but also highlight the Palestinian political prisoner situation. And, last time on the show, we talked about the similarities between Palestinian political prisoners and the South African case, the fact that you have stuff like legislations like administrative detention, similar to detention without trial that you had in South Africa, the kind of, it's a copy and paste kind of arrangement that's taking place in terms of the implementation of the policy of apartheid that's happening in Israel. But what it did, it really highlighted the issue of political prisoners in South Africa and the world globally. Unfortunately, you had now, Ahmed Tamimi, and I think you've been following that conversation as well, a teenager who's been in Israeli jails just for slapping a soldier and defending one of their own comrades. Yeah. And that's the situation we find ourselves, where the political prisoner situation is concerned. But in particular, child political prisoners, Palestinian child political prisoners. It's really terrible.
Yeah, I can imagine. And actually, I was thinking about that now when we got to speaking, is that there's children now getting involved. It's getting a bit more hectic. But obviously now we're talking about how the South African Human Rights and Palestine Solidarity Organizations, BDS, South Africa, registered NGO and Public Benefit Organization, PBO, has been named, among the 20 international groups that have been added to a blacklist by the Israeli government, which is the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, headed by, I don't know if it's Gilad. Is it Gilad or Gilad?
Yeah, Gilad.
Gilad, yeah. Yes. Okay. So according to him, BDS movement or members in the BDS movement have been blacklisted and will no longer get into their country. Let's get to the basics. What does it actually mean to be blacklisted? Besides, being not being able to enter the country, what does it actually mean when they say you've been blacklisted?
I mean, the way in which Israel has been carrying out its operations in terms of targeting the global BDS movement, I think really when they heightened the offensive, if you will, it started in 2014. So they have a ministry now that is dedicated to fighting BDS at a global scale.
Wow.
This speaks about injection of funds into that ministry as well, espionage, spying on activists as well, and many other things. But the way in which they've been dealing with the BDS activists globally differs from one country to the next. For example, in terms of where the US is concerned, there's been increasing attempts to have legislations that criminalizes BDS. To say when you do BDS, it's illegal, and you're engaging in illegal activity, which is absolutely ridiculous because it's a human rights initiative. We engage in human rights activities. You're basically saying advocating for human rights should be criminalized.
Activism should be criminalized.
Precisely what they're saying. But of course, the fight is on in the US and they're saying it won't win because of, the First Amendment where the US is concerned. In certain countries, for example, I think in France, there has been similar attempts as well, to criminalize BDS. But of course, activists on the ground are fighting as well. But you've also seen some European countries coming out and saying this is absolutely ridiculous. People have a right to do BDS. So basically affirming activists and human rights defenders, saying the Swedish government, the Dutch government saying, look, people have a right to do BDS. And people have a right to engage in various forms of human rights activities.
Yes.
And that's what's happening. And essentially for us, and when we interpret what the blacklist means, it's an indication that Israel is really in a panic mode. It's saying that the BDS movement is working. It's saying that the various victories that are registered every single day in different parts of the world, and, we could talk about even in South Africa, just towards the end of last year, the Tshwane University of Technology comes out and adopts academic and cultural boycotts of Israel, saying that they will not enter into any form of agreements at academic level with any Israeli academic institution, This is coming out, and at the same time, Israel is saying, okay, we're blacklisting BDS activists, but you can't muzzle solidarity. You can't do that.
I completely agree. And which groups have been targeted? I saw in the press release that there's a Jewish group that's also been targeted in part of the list. Why do you think this is so? Why is there a top 20? Or if anything, why is there? It sounds like I don't know what. It just doesn't sound right. Why? What led to this?
So we don't know the criteria that was used in terms of you saying which particular organizations are going to be blacklisted. But among the list of organizations that are there, you're right. There's a Quaker organization that's there as well. That has done great work as well. But what you're highlighting is very important because people saying, oh no, BDS is anti-Jew, it's anti-Semitic, which is not the case. But what the problem that the Israeli government has is those that speak against the occupation. And you have organizations, like the Jewish Voices for Peace, South African Jews for a Free Palestine here at home, that are speaking openly and saying what Israel is doing is wrong and they must never do it in our name. And organizations that feature on the top 20, BDS South Africa is among them, of course. You've got, I think, BDS Chile, BDS France, BDS Italy, I think Friends of Al-Aqsa as well, some organizations based in the UK as well. I think the one that does work on the sports boycott as well that are there. I'm not sure what criteria it is, but it's quite ridiculous because
it's really ridiculous.
Already Israel has increasingly over the years, even in South Africa, have denied entry of various people, government officials as well, going to do government work and saying just because you've spoken out against the occupation a number of times in the past, and that's the criteria they use. They really go out of their way and profile people, The former Minister of Higher Education, Blade Nzimande, was denied entry into Israel, I think in 2014. The current Minister of Sports, Thula Singlesi, was also denied entry in 2012. Desmond Tutu was denied entry into Palestine as well. The Special Rapporteur on Human Rights for the United Nations, Professor Richard Falk, who was actually focusing on the Palestinian-Israeli situation, was denied entry. How must he do his job? on behalf of an international kind of, organization that's meant to be dealing with human rights. So those are the kind of people that Israel is denying entry to. But of course, there's also an increasing list of Christians in South Africa that are being denied entry into Palestine, going to do humanitarian work. They work with a program called the EAPPI, the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program for the World Council of Churches. They spent about 3 months in the occupied territories doing very good work, for the WCC. And there's a growing list of them that have been denied entry into Palestine. So I guess they also form part of this top 20. Yeah, man.
Man, I think there's something in me that says this is more fuel. It adds more fuel to the fire than it stops you. What is this going to do to your movement? Is it even going to dent it? Or does it make it easier for you to do your job? Because now you can see there's a bit of a offense, so there's hostility and they're scared.
Palestinians at one point saying the biggest fan of BDS is actually the Israeli regime.
100%.
The way they go out of their way and say, but BDS is a threat, which means BDS is working, and I mean, if anything, I think activists are encouraged. They say, okay, we're definitely on the right track. If this is the response and this is the attitude, of the Israeli regime in terms of how people conduct BDS and the way they're treating human rights defenders, BDS movement is definitely on the right track. So as far as we're concerned, it's an affirmation that the work we're doing needs to continue. If anything, we need to intensify and strengthen the work of the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Global Movement.
Completely agree. And talking about strengthening, what can we expect from BDS this year? What can people look forward to? What do you think is going to be the big highlights for 2018 for BDS?
Sure, man. You're putting us under so much pressure.
Yes, 2018.
Sure. But I mean, we are on the, we're about to start the annual International Israeli Apartheid Week.
Yes.
It's going to take place, it's a week-long campaign that's aimed at, raising awareness of Israel's apartheid policies. But what's most important is that it serves to garner support for the growing BDS movement. In South Africa, it's going to be, marked between the 12th to the 18th of March. And it's really about saying to communities, in your daily lives, as you engage, you have your community meetings, your tea parties, your stockfels and so on, raise these issues in your daily spaces, conscientize people. And that's what Israeli Apartheid is really about, educating, raising awareness, conscientizing people. And in the South African context, it should be so easy because it's so easy to draw the parallels between, what happened during the struggle against apartheid in South Africa and what Palestinians are going through today. It's so important. So Israeli Apartheid Week is coming up and we're really encouraging people and urging people, get involved to the best of your ability. And there are various ways you can do it, within traditional spaces, at universities. There are various Palestinian solidarity communities that you can, acquaint yourself with, engage them and see what they're planning. I know at the Wits University, they're planning a lot. They always have these creative things that are happening. The UCT Palestine Solidarity Committee there at the University of Pretoria, my alma mater as well. They've lots of stuff that's happening as well. But also community-based organizing. It's amazing view what communities are doing, hey,
100.
in terms of engaging and, their own way of conscientizing and raising awareness, at that level. It's absolutely fantastic. So in the townships as well. And don't be afraid to engage with also BDS South Africa in terms of what we can assist with during this period. If you want to get involved, you want to have a lecture, a workshop on the issue. And churches are doing fantastic work, viewer, as well. The United Congregational Church of Southern Africa, I think in 2017 or 2006, was the first church in South Africa to adopt BDS. And the work that they've been doing in terms of raising awareness. And I mean, historically, churches have been used as activist organizations. If you remember the role of, religious leaders during the struggle against apartheid, Reverend Trevor Harrelson, Desmond Tutu as well, and the church became a place of refuge, for those that are engaged in activism and running away from the police and so on. So really also the church must become that space as well where the Palestinian issue is concerned. Also because of the conversation around the biblical land of Israel versus the modern state. Churches are doing fantastic work.
I completely agree. I love the fact that you said conscientizing. I think we need to bring up these conversations more when we meet up in all of our different spaces. And I completely agree with you. And you said people can get a hold of you guys where so that they can find out how to help.
Sure. I mean, our offices are based in Braamfontein at 77 de Korte, but do follow us on social media as work. Ali's going to love me for saying this. So Ali is in the office and I know he's going to listen to the podcast. He's doing fantastic work. So do follow us on social media at BDS South Africa, both on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook as well. You find us at BDS South Africa. So drop us an inbox, tweet at us, suggest also other fantastic ideas in terms of events and programs and awareness raising opportunities and spaces you think that should be penetrated, engage with us. Feel free to contact us as well, and we can also come down to your communities.
Definitely. That was Kwara Kekana, spokesperson of the BDS movement, talking a little bit about their recent blacklist, which I think is a good thing. If you want to know a little bit more about the BDS movement, you can find out on our Twitter page at Brand Live Radio, as well as on theirs. We'll have all the information for you straight after this show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
much, Viwe. That was lovely. And take a short break and we'll be back with things to remember.
What is individual social responsibility? Social responsibility is about me, you, and us. It is about our action, how we affect people, the community, and the environment around us. What if we all accepted responsibility for the challenges that our communities face? What if we challenged ourselves to create positive impact with every action we take? Just like businesses focus on corporate social responsibility, JCI members are challenged to focus on individual social responsibility. We all have rights as citizens, but we also have responsibilities. The JCI Active Citizen Framework is a social plan that serves as a roadmap to sustainable development. That is what social responsibility is about. It is about me, you, and all of us taking responsibility for the future of our world, starting from our local community.
Imagine that you have $1.25. In the United States, you can have 5 bags of deep cheese and a pretzel. In London, you can have an instant soup. In India, you can have 2 steamed rice cakes. In Ghana, you can have a small box of chicken and rice. While you're imagining the tasty smell of that chicken and rice, 1.3 billion people around the world only have $1.25 to survive per day. They don't have a choice, but you do.
You're listening to brandlive.co.za.
On the social show with myself, Viwe, and if you missed out on Kekana speaking a little bit about the BDS movement and all they've been going through since our last conversation with them, you can definitely catch it on the podcast, on our Brand Live Radio site, www.brandliveradio, or on Twitter. I'll definitely send the link. And of course, it's time for my favorite part of the show, things to remember. I'm going to play a short clip, and then straight afterwards, we're going to have a young discussion.
On the 6th of April of 2010, my boss told me I was fired. Probably some of you are unemployed or were unemployed. But I'm sure that you have friends or colleagues who are in these states. Let me just tell you that nothing happens. Life continues outside that company. In my case, it lasted almost a year and a half. And I call it a period of personal and professional transition, which must be seen as an opportunity. And I'm going to tell you why. After working more than 10 years in the construction sector, my environment changed radically. Once, I had an office, a business car, and a parking place. Now, I have this car borrowed from my parents, and I have a new office, but it was more familiar. It was my home. So working routines and environments changed, so I had to make sense of this new and familiar world. Let me tell you a little bit of this new world. Firstly, my family. My wife wasn't working. We realized we will be spending a lot of time together. We focus on cutting costs and maintaining our own spaces. Having a daughter was crucial because she allowed us to have a normal life with a routine of getting up all mornings to take her to elementary school. Secondly, the outside world. Being unemployed is like being on a roller coaster with its ups and downs. Let me just tell you that I did 7 revisions of my CV. But the most important lesson was to be in touch with people, with friends, colleagues, and other job seekers. Because if they didn't know that you had a problem, they couldn't help you.
All right, that was Yuan Jimenez Rokaber talking a little bit about unemployment, a stage in life that he recommends. I don't know. I'm struggling to grasp that concept of unemployment being a stage that he recommends. I think what he's trying to say is that sometimes when you are unemployed, you think that it's the end of your life, nothing else can work out, you are useless, you're not contributing to the economy. But I don't think that's true. I think there's an element of truth when he says it's a time to reflect and it's a time to really understand that your environment is changing, your life is changing. How you go about understanding jobs and getting a job has to change too. And I think a lot of the time we think, oh, we're unemployed, it's because of our CV, or it's because we're not qualified enough or experienced enough. But I also think that it's very important that we are creative in our job hunting processes. I mean, South Africa's unemployment rate came to 27.7% in the third quarter of 2017. Which I think is horrible, but that should not be your driving factor. Your driving factor should be the fact that you're unemployed. What can you reflect on? Who are your friends? Who's your family? Who's in your life that can help you? But lastly, how do I make this job finding process a little bit more creative? If you have any insights on whether or not you think unemployment, whether you are a new graduate, which I think maybe is a bit different than when you've been employed, then unemployed, then employed, then unemployed. What has that transition done for you, and what did you learn? Did you sit down and reflect? Did you save well? Did you understand the world better? Or did you just moan and pine on your joblessness? So it's a good conversation to have, I think, with your colleagues, with your friends, with your unemployed friends, to say, how has unemployment affected you? How have you tried to change it? And what have you been thinking about? Who have you been engaging with? And what are your networks like? Who are your friends? What do they do? Can they help? And I hope that's something that you'll remember. And next time you talk to anybody, remember that even if you do have a job, it's secure. You never know what tomorrow holds. So you always have to keep on the engagements, keep on talking, keep on making sure that you are involved within the economy. You are involved in how people are making money. And that concludes our show for this beautiful Wednesday. I will be back again, same time, same place, 9:30 to 10, only on The Social Show.
Brandlive.co.za. ZA.